That was a massive crime scene.
It's an extremely violent attack.
The single most disturbing thing I've ever seen.
They were bound and then bludgeoned.
There is no understanding. Some people are just evil.
Our blood ran cold. We now have a serial killer.
In the early morning hours of May 16, 2005, just outside Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, Shasta Groene is sleeping in her room when her mother wakes her up.
She had actually come into the room and said that there's a man here that doesn't want us to be here.
Confused, Shasta follows her mother into the living room where she sees a man holding a shotgun. The man tells her to get on the ground and binds her hands with zip ties and duct tape.
My stepdad, Mark, had said, we don't have money. We were hearing bangs, and then he was screaming and yelling.
The man attacks Mark, Brenda Groene, and Slade Groene with a hammer.
I was in the house with my family members, and I didn't know if they were dead or not.
A couple of minutes passed by where it was quiet, and I could just hear footsteps.
He grabbed me, picked me up, and took me into the backyard and laid me under the tree next to my brother.
8-year-old Shasta and 9-year-old Dylan Groene have no idea what's in store for them or what happened to the rest of their family. Suddenly, Slade comes running out of the house, not sure where to go or what to do. The man chases him down and beats him with a hammer. The man puts the 2 children in a car and drives them about 100 miles away to a campground outside St. Regis, Montana, in the Lolo National Forest, and then reveals to the children what he did.
He grabbed the hammer. He said, see this hammer? This is the hammer that I murdered your mom and your stepdad and your brother with. And he was like, they're not alive and you're never going to see them again.
Back at the Groene home, a neighbor stops by to visit the family. He sees blood on the front door and calls the police.
I went to the door to pay the little kid $10 for mowing the lawn, and there's blood all over the door. Nobody comes through the door.
Police arrive to find the worst crime scene they've ever witnessed.
After sustaining the injuries that he had, and that's why there was blood on the door, blood on the steps, and blood in front of the kid's bedroom in the grass. He moved into the house, and ultimately he must have got up, walked out to where his mother was, laid down next to her, and that's where he died.
We have a homicide scene with 1 adult male, 1 adult female, and 1 juvenile male. Our main concern right now are the 2 children we cannot find.
Inside the house, investigators find the bodies of Brenda Groene, Mark McKenzie, and Slade Groene. Police begin frantically searching the area for Shasta and Dylan. They also question family and friends, hoping that Shasta and Dylan weren't home at the time of the crime, but no one seems to know. Investigators approach Steve Groene, the children's father, for questioning. He admits to having a fight with Brenda just a couple days earlier over custody of the children. He also appears on the news and makes a statement that investigators find suspicious.
I'd like to address my children's abductors or abductor. Please release my children safely. They had nothing to do with any of this.
What did he mean by they didn't have anything to do with it? After looking into Steve further, investigators were able to verify his alibi and cleared him as a suspect. Shasta and Dylan are far from home, have lost most of their family, and are now being held by the man who killed them. The man spares them no time and begins abusing them at the campsite in a nearby cabin. Shasta learns that their captor's name is Joseph, and he also goes by the nickname Jet. She would later use this information to her advantage. As days turn to weeks, the horror continues.
There was a couple times where he said he had to go to town to get more food or something, but me and Dylan would be chained. I would be chained to a tree, and Dylan would be chained to the tent that had the stakes in the ground and stuff. He would make sure that we weren't close enough to be able to help each other, but we would be close enough to conversate, which is kind of hopeless. We knew that if we tried to get away, we would probably starve to death. We didn't even know where we were.
One night, Joseph takes the abuse to a different level. He starts playing mind games with the children, telling them they can go home if they do what they're told, and he has them write letters to their families suggesting they might come back.
Dear Dad, I miss you very much, and me and Dylan know what happened to Mom, Mark, and Slade, and we both feel very sorry for them, and we both miss you and Jesse and Vance, and we might see you guys again.
The letters were never sent. It was just another way for their captor to manipulate them.
I think after a certain amount of time, Dylan had started to lose hope that it was going to turn out good for him.
Investigators back in Idaho are following up on dozens of tips and leads, but none of them are panning out. Shasta and Dylan lean on each other to get through the terrifying ordeal, but the abuse continues to get worse. Joseph begins forcing drugs and alcohol on them, and when he believes they are under the influence, he would openly tell them horrifying stories of what he did to other children. Little did he know that Shasta was taking mental notes of every word he said.
He very vividly and in detail described murders of two sisters from Seattle, Amija White and Carmen. He would tell us the way that he had done it, where he had placed their bodies. When he had started telling us about the murders, I was like, okay, well, I'm going to pretend like I'm drinking this.
Shasta knows that Joseph feels a connection with her and formulates a plan to act like his friend.
I would ask questions about his life, ask him about his family, and could I meet them one day?
It was a conscious thing, like I need to make him think that I love him or that I want to be here with him.
Though Joseph had acted a little nicer the last couple of days, things were about to take a turn. He offered the kids a challenge.
If we caught this squirrel that kept coming to the campsite, that we could go home. And Dylan caught the squirrel. And Joseph had us thinking that we were packing up and that he was going to let us go home. I was standing there with my brother. I had just given him a hug, and so I was holding his hand, and I heard a loud bang and a crashing sound. And then I felt my brother's hand slip from mine. Joseph walked up to him and he shot my brother in the head.
Shasta has lost another brother, and her psychotic captor has forced her to help him wrap her brother's body in a tarp and burn it. She is now completely alone and must face horrors that no other person should have to endure, especially an 8-year-old. After holding her for 6 weeks, Joseph decides to move to another campsite farther down the mountain. As Shasta is bound up in a tent, she can see other people walking trails nearby. Shasta wants to cry for help, but knows that Joseph would probably kill her and any other witnesses, so she stays quiet. Soon after that, Joseph offers Shasta a terrible choice.
One day, he asked me, "How do you want to die? You have 2 choices. I can shoot you or you can be strangled to death."
I felt like if I had chose the strangulation, that I might have a chance to talk him out of what he was doing.
He had me lay down on the ground and he put a rope around my neck and he squeezed it. Everything started turning white.
Shasta must think quickly if she is to save her life.
And I said, "Please don't, Jet." So when I had said, "Please don't, Jet," he loosened his grip on the rope. And, you know, when you call me that, it just means different. I can tell you really care about me.
Shasta has managed to survive and continues to build trust with her captor.
Anytime me going home was brought up, I would tell him, "No, I don't want to go. I want to stay here with you." He'd be like, "Really?" You could tell that it was starting to catch him off guard a little bit.
It's been 7 weeks since Shasta was taken, and she continues to cling to hope when Joseph approaches her with a proposition.
He basically sat me down and asked if I would be his kid and I would stay with him, you know, that I would call him Dad.
He's like, "I want to take you to meet my mom. Would you meet her?" And I had said yes.
Shasta knows that her captor is growing attached to her, and she needs to get to a more public place where she might be seen and rescued.
And I said, can you take me to where I grew up? Like, I want to show you where I went to school. And I want to show you where my best friend lives. Like, I want to show you all these places that are important to me because you're important to me. And he was like, yeah, of course, I would love to.
Joseph is driving Shasta back to Coeur d'Alene and decides to stop at a gas station. The police receive a tip of a sighting at that location, but by the time police arrive and verify Shasta's identity on the surveillance tapes, she is long gone.
I remember just holding on to hope, but still feeling like there wasn't going to be any.
After leaving the gas station, Joseph asks Shasta if she is hungry. Hoping to be seen in public, she says yes. They go to the Denny's in Coeur d'Alene.
As I was walking in, I noticed that my missing persons poster was right there. There was this guy standing outside, and he was with his friends, and he nodded his head, and I nodded my head, and he went up to the counter and made it kind of seem like he was conversating with one of the waitresses, and then I seen her look over at me.
I went in for a regular shift, and I had been at work for probably about 4 hours. Coming back from break, I see a man and what looks to be a child in my section. It was about 1:30, 1:45-ish in the morning. So it was a little strange, but I walked over to say hello to my customers.
I'd spoken to my manager, said, I think we should probably call Coeur d'Alene PD. I'm pretty positive that's Shasta Groene over there. I'll pay for their meal if I'm wrong. We need to get somebody up here.
I've got a little girl here with a tall gentleman, and she looks so much like that Shasta, and we're not sure. I don't know.
The man tried to get up and leave, but Amber managed to stall him long enough until the police got there, and they immediately recognized Shasta. They placed the man under arrest. The suspect arrested is 42-year-old Joseph Duncan, with a history of sexual assault that dates back to the age of 15. In 2004, he was charged with molesting a boy in Minnesota. He had borrowed $15,000 for bail and skipped town. Police searched the car that Duncan was driving and discovered it was stolen. Inside, they found a shotgun and video equipment with recordings of Shasta and Dylan while he was holding them captive. Investigators wondered where Dylan was, but Joseph Duncan wasn't talking. They had to rely on young 8-year-old Shasta to recount her living hell and explain what happened to her brother.
The thought of an 8-year-old girl having to observe this and then having to relive it to an investigator after the fact is just amazing to me. She witnessed things that grown people would be traumatized for the rest of their lives and never be able to speak about.
Shasta shows incredible courage while recounting her story, and then goes on to tell police of the details that Joseph Duncan shared about other murders he might have committed.
I remembered everything, and then when I was found, I told the investigators what he had told me.
Joseph Duncan finally confesses and tells investigators that he hunted for his targets. He would drive through neighborhoods and mark houses that had children with GPS. He happened to drive by the Groene's house and saw Dylan and Shasta playing out in the yard. He scouted out the house and the family for days, preparing for the attack.
I remember him telling me that he was able to get the dog to come to him, and he gave her treats and stuff and befriended our pit bull so that when he did come into the house to do what he was going to do, there was not that type of issue to get in the way.
At the trial, the jury must watch video that Duncan recorded of what he did to the kids. The footage shows the evil brutality he unleashed on the children.
I think it's probably the single most disturbing piece of evidence, disturbing thing I've ever seen in my entire life.
While the video is extremely disturbing, it is the absolute key piece of evidence prosecutors can use to send Joseph Duncan to death row.
On October 16, 2006, Joseph Duncan pleads guilty to 2 counts of kidnapping and 3 counts of murder and receives 3 life sentences. He also pleads guilty to 10 federal charges in connection to the kidnapping and sexual assault of Shasta and Dylan and the murder of Dylan. He is sentenced to death.
31 years of being involved in the criminal justice system. I have never met a evil Joseph.
Duncan is sent to federal prison in Terre Haute, Indiana, and dies while on death row from brain cancer on March 28, 2021. After all that she had been through, Shasta struggles while growing up.
I was happy to be in a safe place, but there was still that part of me that's like, well, what if this happens again?
Struggling from PTSD, Shasta hates being recognized and going to therapy.
I just wanted to be a normal teenage girl. There was still court stuff going on with Joseph Duncan. There was still counseling that I had to do, and I didn't feel good about myself or the person that I was. So I think that all kind of pushed me over the edge.
Shasta struggles with drugs and alcohol in her early teenage years and is sent to a juvenile facility where she meets other girls that went through similar experiences.
The judge was very honest with me, and she's like, Shasta, I feel like you do have a lot of help you can give people, and I feel like you're way better than what you're being.
Shasta's life turns around after she has kids and gets married.
I know that I lived for a reason, and I know that there's a reason that I'm on this planet still, and that I know that I'm here to help other people. If there's anybody in the world right now that's being abused and they hear that I'm giving up, what would that do for them?